This is James Bingham from Palmer Hamilton Fab Lab. Hey everybody, in this lesson today we are going to talk about Tinkercad designs when you are changing the size, height, and rotating an object. So let's get into it. So this is the screen, the dashboard that you get to when you log in. We are going to hit Create New Design. That's going to bring up our work plane. First thing we're going to do is bring an object into the work plane. So we go over our shapes, select the shape. I'm just going to do a box, bring it into the work plane. This is in millimeters. Let's keep that in mind when we're doing sizing. There are many different ways to do your sizing. I should say two very important ones would be dragging the box. It's almost as if it's an image, right? So you bring an image into Microsoft Word or Paint and you can resize that image, right? You can do the same thing with these boxes. Now let's say I want to make it taller. I can click and drag this top box here and bring it up and down. Okay, so the other way is that we could type into these boxes. So how do I get those boxes to pop up? I tap the box, click it. I go over to these little white boxes on the corners or on the top, right? I tap that. It brings up these boxes to which I can type into. So I type in, I type enter. I go over to this one. I make it a 15 by 15. I do it to the top as well, the height. And now I have a 15 by 15 box. So let's say we get that box sized how we want. Now we want to rotate it. Again, different ways to rotate. Okay, so if I'm in the top view, it's only going to let me rotate in a circle. So let's say I want to rotate. I click the rotate and I can drag. Now, when I'm closer to the object, it's going to give more bigger gaps. The further I go out, the easier it is to get very minor adjustments if I wanted to, right? So if I wanted to put this at 90 degrees, there's my 90. Okay, let's say I want to rotate it on its side though. It's the same concept. I click and drag. So I can make it at 45. I can make it at 90. Let's say I want to do the typing method, just like we did with our measurements here. You tap, you type, right? So here, you tap the arrows. It brings this up. And you can rotate it. Now I've rotated it 45 degrees. Now we're going to go into another feature because notice I am going through the work plane right now. So I have to get this above the work plane or right on it. There's another arrow here. That's that one right there that I have boxed up there. I tap that black arrow and I can move this up and down through the work plane above it. Now notice on the right side here, I've got numbers here. That's telling me how far above I am on the work plane. So how could I get this to 0? I tap that, type 0, and I'm at 0. Now I'm not below the work plane. I'm right on top of it. Okay. Let's say I go up here. One thing to keep in mind is that while I've got this down here, it's also up here. So I have two different options. I can either click here, type 0, or I could click here and go up and down however I want. Now we're going to rotate this back 45 degrees. I'm off the work plane. I want to get back down. to 0. One feature I didn't talk about in the other video was the snap grid. The snap grid's right over here. So what is the snap grid? You see all these tiny little squares here. When I move this object, it's snapping to those objects, right? So if I want this to move a lot smaller increments, I change the snap grid. So now it's moving 0.1 millimeters. Now let's say I want to move it freely. I turn the snap grid off. It's going to be very hard to see. I'll zoom in. And I can move it freely. So this is moving it without the snap grid, which you might need to use. If I bring another object in here, I'll show you an example. If I have the snap grid on 1 millimeter, I move it over, my objects are kind of intersecting, right? Let's say I want to get them perfectly touching. I'm going to turn my snap grid off, and I'm going to move it. Still got some space there. I'm going to slowly get rid of that. And we are there. Look at that, they're perfectly touching. And that's what happens when you turn the snap grid off. So those are the basic functions of rotating the objects, sizing the objects, playing with the height, and scaling it with the click and drag functions. Alright, have fun tinkering.